Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm gonna get things rolling. Um, we're joined today by Eryn Davis and Barb Depew. I think we started working together pretty soon after I joined Kansas Rural Center for the Kansas Farm to School Network, which was largely championed by Barb and Eryn, but has a wide group of partners throughout the state. Um, Today, we're going to highlight some of the activities that the Kansas Farm to Plate initiative does with child nutrition programs in Kansas and how farmers can link up with those programs and serve their schools, hopefully creating a stable market for themselves and providing fresh local foods for the students. I'm going to start off by introducing Barb, and she's going to speak, and then she will introduce Eryn, and then I will let you guys let people know if you prefer questions throughout or if you want to talk a little bit and then have questions at the end. This write-up is from Barb's retirement announcement, and I thought it was so nice that I was going to share it with you. So, word for word. Barb Depew, Farm to Plate Project Director, will retire from KSDE on December 5th. Barb has spent 45 years working as a registered dietitian, the last 25 with the child nutrition programs. Barb began her career with K-State Student Union working in the dining services. While working at K-State, she took on the role as cadre trainer for KSDE Child Nutrition and Wellness. She then pivoted to working in child nutrition programs full-time at USD 320 Wamego School District Food Services Director for 10 years. In 2008, Barb joined Kansas Department of Education Child Nutrition and Wellness team, where she worked as a consultant and finally moving into the role as Farm to Plate Project Director for the last 7 years. So, in those 7 years, I think that she's accomplished a lot. And congratulations on your retirement, Barb. I'll go ahead and let you go on from here.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so nutrition has kind of been my business. And when I was, able to work then through our department here to add local into the business, I just think that is the best way for us to let our kids know where food comes from and to go ahead and connect them to the producers, the sources, just having activities, education related to local foods. So on our team here at KSDE, then we work across the state then through not only our schools, but also our child cares. We have summer meal programs, after school snack and supper programs, and we also have our fresh fruit and vegetable program, which is a great place to put local produce in to try. And so we have a team. Our consultants work across the state too with the programs, and we get feedback from them when there is local foods incorporated. We also do our annual program renewal. And in that program renewal, then we've asked our sponsors, which is what we call our school food authorities, we've asked them to tell us if there's local foods involved in their programs and how this is happening. So there's a lot of ways that we work then to connect through either trainings that we do, grant projects that we have had, any of the connections with our partners throughout then in the areas. So we work then as they connect to us to go ahead and share then as far as what we know of producers in their region or their areas. It does not, local can look like many different things. It doesn't have to be then, the whole plate. We want that to happen, but local can be as small as maybe just having a tasting, having a producer visit a school. It can be something that they might be growing actually on the garden that they have at the school property. Maybe they have, again, had any activities that have related to farm and field trips that they have done. Any of that is a way to introduce the local product. So we try to create and have those opportunities and avenues for the kids. So Eryn is with me on the team, and so that she is a coordinator then through some grant projects that we have had. I'm going to have her share about the formula grant, which is something that many of our districts, many of our most states have received. And so the formula grant was an opportunity with funding then to go ahead and have many activities written into it, grant projects and things that we are doing. So I'll let Eryn, she's a coordinator in our department and also works a lot with the grant writing that is being done.
Thanks, Barb. As Barb mentioned, I work also at KSDE in Child Nutrition and Wellness for Local Foods. I've been here 3 years, and I was, as Barb mentioned, hired on as part of a formula grant that KSDE received, the Farm to School Formula Grant, which was a part of funds like during COVID times in 2022 that was administered to every state across the nation to incorporate local foods and promote farm to school. So Kansas dedicated our farm to school formula grant for a couple different projects, and we've created a Harvest of the Month program. You can find information on that on our website. I can send the link here in a minute in the chat so you can take a look at that. Celebrating one Kansas grown food or raised Kansas grown food every month of the year. And we have promotional materials and education materials that go with that. We have done a couple bus tours, 7 bus tours across the state to connect our child nutrition program operators to local farms. We've kind of hit up each area, each region of the state. If you break it up into 6 regions, that's kind of what we focused on. We have 2 tours upcoming left of the grant that we'll do next year in 2026. We've hosted the Farm to School at ECE Institute. So this is a year-long program that our schools and early child care providers can be a part of to launch their farm to school projects. It starts with a retreat that's 2 or 3 days. They work with a coach, really create a goal and a plan for their farm to school programs or farm to ECE programs. And then the next year they work with that coach and then also get resources from our state department, as well as the Nebraska and Missouri Departments of Education, because we partnered with them on this project. We also have one of those institutes left upcoming in 2026 as well. So if you know a school district or a child care that would be interested, that's kind of wanting to get farm to school or ECE started, but they need some extra resources or, a little bit of hand holding to do so, we're happy to do that. And that's what this program is for. We have some farm to plate coaches across the state that go into different districts. This one's primarily just for schools, but goes into school districts to coach on farm to plate efforts. And then we're also revising the Healthier Kansas menus, which is the menu template here at Child Nutrition and Wellness for general, like our child nutrition programs. But we are revising them to include more local foods. So we're revising some of the recipes to be more local food friendly. And then also doing some work to train some trainers that will go across the state to help our folks know how to do like cutting of different things, chopping, different preparatory materials that they would need for using local foods, because in some cases they're used to getting all that prep done for them when they buy it from like a broadline distributor. So we'll be working on that. That grant expires in 2026 and September of 26. So we're almost done with that. We've had several farm to school grants in the past. We've had 4 actually farm to school grants in the past. We also had the Local Food for Schools grant, which provided funding for all districts across the state to buy local meat for their nutrition program. So schools had the opportunity to opt in or opt out of that. And we had about 73% of schools decide to participate in that program. And if they didn't decide to participate, there was various reasons for that. Like they didn't have the staff or they didn't have the equipment needed to prep, like raw ground beef, things like that. So we can elaborate more on that if you all are interested. But anyway, that's kind of a snapshot of the grant opportunities that we've had here. In addition to the grants, Barb and I also offer technical assistance at any time. So schools or childcare can just call us and ask, for local food options in their area. We have a database here of about over 1,000 producers across the state that we can kind of connect with our child nutrition program operators. If they have questions about like on-site growing, like gardens or greenhouses that they may have, we help them with that, or connect them with the Department of Agriculture, coordinating organizations that may be of assistance to them. So we do a couple different things, but I mean, all relating to increasing local foods for our folks here in Kansas.
Thank you, Eryn. And again, we've helped fund, some of these projects across the state, but we know that there's a lot more that's happening out there, and we just try to help them find funding and the training. And I'm gonna give a call out to one of our attendees today, Lori Bruce, who is actually with us. She is on our team at this time, and has just recently joined us, and so we are glad to have her. And she has served as one of those coaches that Eryn spoke about for the Institute team. She is also a culinary coach for us and has done the culinary trainings in the schools, any of the schools or the child cares that are interested in having a coach on site to help them learn, whether it be about breads, it would be about cutting, chopping, knife skills kinds of things, any of those kinds of things. So Lori is on a team of coaches that we are able to send out as needed then to help with some of that education then in the kitchen part of the work that we do. And so this has been wonderful. And also, as Eryn mentioned, then the Healthier Kansas menus. Many of these are able to be adapted to use local foods, the recipes that are in these. And so we are going to be working with more local ingredients with some of those recipes coming up. And we're going to be testing some new recipes then with our schools. So we have some pilot schools that are going to be testing those recipes for us. And Lori will be helping us in that area too. So even though I'm leaving, there's some great people that are going to be continuing to carry on some of our projects and things that are going on out there. We mentioned those coaches that Eryn mentioned out there too. So as we have, and you can look yourselves too at Data Central out there as they have reviews, there are commendations that are being given to our districts that actually have done work in the local foods areas, and so that's kind of a pat on the back. That's one of the things that we really find that our child nutrition programs don't really do a very good job of actually giving themselves accolades, and so we sometimes have to do that for them. One of the ways that we do that is in what we call Kansans Can Awards. This is an annual award. It's a self-nomination, although we do nudge a few for that. The Kansans Can Award then can be in several different areas, one of those being local foods areas, and another of them is also the wellness area. So that each year with our state board, we are able to go ahead and recognize those that have achieved what we consider to be, the great work that they're doing in the local foods areas. So that is one way that we go ahead then and give them some additional credit. I would encourage you to go ahead and look at our website. We do have the resources there that Eryn mentioned for the Harvest of the Month. We also have a list of the grantees that we have funded. So depending on the area that you're here with us today from, you may recognize some of those districts and some of those programs that are out there. And so that is something that we really would encourage you to have that conversation. We've had some great meetings with some of the different areas as far as the economic development groups that are across the state, the farm and food councils, working with partners in those areas that again, just to let them know what schools are doing and what child cares are doing in their areas. So we want to just go ahead and try to share good news when we can. So I think Eryn will go ahead. I maybe put the link, it looks like, then with that. So yeah, so with all of our things that we work with, many of our child nutrition programs, we want to start it as what we call our farm to plate team. And so that, again, as you're out there working with any of our nutrition areas, consider then who the team is that is there. Is there a FACS teacher? Is there an ag educator? Are there producers in the areas? Are there community members that would want to be part of a team to go ahead then and talk about where we can find local? Some of the best original stories I feel that were with the local beef areas was that the actual board members themselves on some of our school boards then were the ones that actually helped find those producers, and maybe some of them were actually producers themselves that they were working with. And so again, knowing who those producers are that are wanting to and willing to work with our programs. If there is an ag educator in the programs, we have seen some great work then with maybe they would be raising chickens or have hydroponics, things that they are doing. The goal for our programs is to get those products into the child nutrition programs and on the children's plates. And obviously, if there's students that are working with the growing or raising of those items, they again have a buy-in and they're very interested in making, again, the success of the local foods area. We have identified, some of the barriers that might be there as far as it could be possibly cost. Sometimes local foods might cost a little bit more, but the quality and again, the ability of the product then to hold much better, especially like in the produce area. We've seen many that have seen then how produce really, really will last a lot longer and the quality is there. And then also in the meats, fresh breads, baked breads. Obviously, milk is local because many of it is coming from a local dairy nearby. So there's a lot of local that again, some of our districts even didn't even realize that they had local, that they were already using in their programs. But we do want to go ahead and make sure that it is recognized if there are producers involved, that they are, given some knowledge of who is bringing that product then to the schools to have to work with. Things that they are getting with the schools from local sources will be able to be purchased then through the food service funds that they have to create then the reimbursable meal. There is opportunity also for donations. So if any of you out there are producers, you can donate your product to the schools. Produce is one way that can be donated. We've had some great community gardens that we have had out there in some of our areas that have actually shared some of their produce then with the schools. During the summertime, I've seen some of the garden produce show up at some of our summer sites just for the kids and families to be able to take home. And summer is a great time to promote local products, through the produce, the gardens, and the things that are being raised. So there's different places that, you as a producer or anyone that is working with producers then can actually work with your programs to go ahead and share your product if you're interested then. So we want to work with you. We want to be able to go ahead and help you connect then to wherever that producer might be and to find what local sources would be available for them. So those are, some of the things that we again, different things that are happening out there. The grants that Eryn had mentioned too, some of those of gardening, some of those are in areas of animal projects that they are actually, purchasing and raising animals, using them as an education, then with the ag educators then to go ahead. And the processing and all that information is something that we do educate and share about as far as how processing, does need to happen through either a Kansas or a USDA inspected locker. So we have the proper labeling on the products that are brought into our child nutrition areas. So that's another thing that we really want to work with then and make sure we educate in those areas too, and working with that. Another kind of this is one of the best, I guess, practices or some of the stories that we have had out there. One of our districts is actually doing what they call a crop drop. And so what that is again, back in that summertime when you've got garden produce that maybe you have extra, they are actually asking in their community then for them to drop that extra produce at the school's doors. And so that the schools then will actually use that to go ahead and maybe create like tomato sauces or pesto or different products that they might go ahead and have, maybe zucchini for zucchini bread that they might be making. So there's a lot of ways those products can be reused, repurposed then too. And so many of the grants that we have also been ways that they can purchase equipment so that they could extend the seasonality of some of the products that might be out there, so that if they could actually either process as a vacuum seal or freeze that product to be able to use to continue through the year. But our best things that we get here in the office are the pictures of some of the kids, that are eating the local products or working with the animals or working in the gardens. And so that's the best that we do. We also want to go ahead and actually share too, as far as when the census happens. That is a farm to school census that actually is part of the network that they do. We hope that will be one of those coming up again. They're every 3 years. But we do know from the census then who in Kansas actually did say that they were working with then the either ag education or gardens or have local products. So we were very, very pleased then with the results in Kansas. We've seen great growth then over the past 3 years then, and increased numbers that we are seeing then with the census results. So as a result, in just a little bit about the census that was done in 22-23 program year, we did have 71%, 284 school food service authorities that actually reported that they are participating in farm to school. So again, about 3/4 out there that have some type, and that could be education, that could be actual food on the plate, that could be gardens, a variety of different things that are counted then as the farm to school areas then. And then a little over half actually said that they were serving the local foods then in their program. And we do know that 14% indicated that they have edible gardens that they have on their school properties. And this was done just with schools. This is not our child care, so this is school related then. And then we also have our school food authorities reporting that 13% of them have actually been working with local foods then for the last 10 years. So at least, and so that is something that we know that there's growth in that area, and so we're excited to be able to see those kinds of things too. So the census is available if you just Google the farm to school census out there, and then you can look at Kansas, and then if you are connected to any of these districts across the state, you can actually look up your own district then too to see what they said about the local foods areas. So Stephanie, I see your question about the list of the Kansas Can Award. I don't know that we have the past list actually posted anywhere. Those are recognized usually at the state board in August, and so it is actually that state board meeting when the recognition is done. So I know we have some records in our files that would say who has been recognized in the past, but we do have some definitely farm to plate champions that we consider out there. We identify those by what they report or what we see. If you want to, if you're on social media, we use hashtag fueling KS Kids. That is the hashtag that we encourage that is being used when we have good news to share. And so that's where you can find some of those schools, those child cares, any of those programs that might be actually sharing some good things that they are doing. So we have some of our champions out there too. So we want you to check that out and see where those areas might be something that you would be again finding out what's happening, and sometimes they give the shout outs to their producers too. So that is great. Thank you, Charlotte, for sharing that. So anyway, yeah, a way to check things out, how things are happening then in the areas then too. So are there questions or things that, other areas that you'd like to know more about? Charlotte, any questions from you?
I have a question about uh, schools being able to process food. I think a lot of times that's a barrier is them having the time. What is a solution that you often offer to that?
So I do think that one of the things, with our programs, we really encourage the work then to be done starting small, sometimes, just getting a product or a small amount of something, maybe even in just one of their buildings rather than all buildings. And each district has a different level as far as what their skill levels are. So it depends, I guess, is kind of the answer to that one. But again, like I mentioned, if there's a way to train, to teach, we have a lot of classes that are offered for that. But we also then do want them to go ahead then and feel good about what they're doing and feel confident in the skills that they have to make that happen. So labor is often a challenge. And so with that, like I mentioned, that minimal processing some of those products, or using the downtime that they might have. Summer, like I said, when produce is great in the summertime, that might be a place that they could go ahead and, actually, process some of the garden produce then to use through the school year. We had one of our examples from a potato producer that's here in Kansas that they were able to purchase a large number of pounds of potatoes within this last couple of months. And they used their vacuum sealer then to go ahead and to dice those potatoes, and those potatoes then will be used school round. So I think equipment is very important, and we do have some equipment grants that do come around usually annually, and so that is one of the ways that they can go ahead and apply for some of that type of equipment that might be helpful to them. We've mentioned the grants that we have. One of the grants that was with the grains allowed districts then to purchase equipment such as dough dividers, proofing cabinets, mixer attachments, any of those kinds of things that might be helpful in that. We also are looking at some of our trainings that we will have, like a Roboku processor that they could go ahead and work to process. So we want to help them with any of those tools that might help speed things up then for them in the area of labor then to work with that.
I see
So,
that Daniel has his hand up.
yes, Daniel.
Yes. So, wanted to ask about in terms of introducing products and kind of like so I'm a microgreen producer, other products as well, but that's kind of our most immediate interest with working with the schools. Because one of the things we produce is sunflower sprouts, which we found has great popularity with small children. Like it's something we've done at farmers markets, we do samples, and one of our biggest points of entry to a sale is kids try them, they love them, that convinces parents towards sale. So we thinking on that, we were like, yeah, this is great for the schools. And also to the point, my wife is an early childhood educator, SPED educator. I worked in schools for a bit. So we worked with kids, kind of know what they like, kind of things that they kind of glom onto. And point is, we have products like this, but we kind of run into a little bit of an issue where we're here in Topeka. So basically we have a product that has a lot of good sustainability value, good nutrient value, and it's appealing to kids. But frankly, the problem is in communities like Topeka, where school staff are they're just not culturally cognizant of these. And frankly, we get a little bit of pushback because they think of them, they're in the same kind of realm as like herbal medicine as opposed to being just a sustainably farmed food stuff. So that's is that when you're talking about these coaches, okay, these coaches, is there any can they work with us? Could we, for example, reach out to one of them and say, hey, could you be a part of how we explain these things? To part of how we kind of say, hey, this because they really do have great value nutritionally. I don't want to go into the ranting about the greatness of microgreens. But then simultaneously, other things that you mentioned here about involvement. You're talking about programs where cultivation is part of a children's activity. That's something that you guys,
Mhm.
that's a favored. Yeah. And then as well, where, well, yeah, just that essentially, that I mean, this is the kind of thing where it works very well with basic science lessons in terms of because all you're doing is essentially sprouting a seed. It's you can go into all kinds of basic science lessons that are already primary education related, where you say, yeah, you're teaching them this is how there's these two leaves that are cotyledons. That's intrinsic to the nature of microgreens, of what they're eating. So getting to that, this is the kind of thing we think we could do really well with some of that. But as said, we frankly, if I was in the KC Metro, I know I don't have these issues, and I know I'd be, but dealing with and kind of these other, can we get kind of some collaboration with these coaches to help kind of to be kind of an authority who can state sideways, yes, these have great value actually nutritionally, and furthermore you can photograph the kid, you can teach them about yada yada. Is there anything like that we can do in coordination with you guys?
Well, I think the first thing to do is what you've just done, is just to reach out to us here,
Mhm.
so that, again, indicating, what some of your struggle has been, and what you would like to achieve and accomplish. But we would consider you a producer. And
Mhm.
so as a result of that, we would go ahead and be happy to make those connections. I would suggest the Wellness Committee, which is who we actually meet with those coaches then that Eryn spoke of, and so that the Wellness Committee could be your champion or your, cheerleader to be able to go ahead and encourage them to follow up. But like our fresh fruit and vegetable program, if they have that, the tastings then of those microgreens would fit very well into
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah, and we are. Oh, sorry. Yeah, please. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So we're happy to provide donations, and we've offered that exact. So yeah, anything like that where you have a schema where you can say, "Hey, provide us some of your product for free," that can then be sampled by stakeholders who are decision makers in this. We are that. That's great. I'm glad to hear that because we're happy to do that. We've tried to do that so far, and strikes and gutters.
Well, interesting that you talk about microgreens, because on just our kind of a follow-up call with the Institute teams, we just had that call this week, and so that with the team that was from Clearwater here in Kansas, that was how she started her local food journey. Then was getting microgreens and having the teachers actually grow them in their classrooms. And
Yeah, yeah.
so that I know that it's happening out there. Sometimes, Daniel, it is a little harder with a bigger district than it might be with a smaller district.
Oh, okay. I
So
didn't consider that.
maybe we could start, with some of the smaller programs that we might have in the Topeka area or even in the surrounding area then too.
Yeah, we've
I
been reaching out to. Oh, so please go ahead. Whoever's sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, we have reached out to Sheldon specific. We have reached out to one specific. We talked to the district at large. They said that they really weren't, they had looked at Sprouts before and they weren't doing it anymore, which I just basically was like, okay, well, not going to push. And then we were informed, but in that conversation, I asked about Sheldon Head Start, and they said, they're actually separate anyway, because being a Head Start, they kind of have different funding streams, apparently, where they can do independent projects like this. And that is who we've talked to. We have received interest from the principal there, so, saying like some folks have expressed interest. It's just, we haven't had any movement on the project, and it's maybe like, well, maybe they just need to see from a higher stakeholder like, hey, no, this has value. I mean, don't
Well,
so
and that's
sorry.
where
Yeah.
you often want to start, is with the
Mhm.
administration, because we
Mhm.
we want the administration to be behind then the use of the local products that we actually have out there.
Mhm.
So
Gotcha.
yeah, I think they've asked about the name of your group, and so we'll try to keep connecting and follow up with you some. But we have
Mhm.
sometimes found that, yeah, the barrier is actually the district themselves, as
Mhm.
far as, they maybe don't understand. It's an education that we need to do. I'm going to go back to Destiny. I had a question in the chat about the program work, who have high rates of free and reduced lunch um, meals, as far as those kids that, again, each district then has their percentage of their free and reduced kids, but the funding that the programs actually receive for those reimbursable meals are based on participation. And that's something that we also really push for local foods, is that if the kids like what they're getting, they're going to eat it and they're going to be part of the meal programs. And so that the funding that is going into our programs is based on the number of kids at each of the meals then. And so that this local foods for any of the levels of free and reduced is pretty much going to be the same impact, the same benefits that they would have. And Stephanie, you have a question?
Yeah, well, thanks for all of this. Appreciate all the work you're doing, and especially was grateful for the farm to school networking events that you did earlier this year. I think, as some of you know, I've been working on a food hub feasibility study for the Salina area. And I'm really curious, especially for a food hub, schools are a great opportunity because that's going to help move the amount of product through that's going to help offset, help us break even as a food hub. And the thing I was curious about, and I think this has been the theme of what you've already been talking about for in this presentation, is just thinking about those ways to help reduce the barriers of entry for the food service directors. And so I've been taking lots of notes on that. And the thing I'm specifically curious about is um, I think to some degree, what I'm learning or hearing is that it's just the time of figuring it out. It's one other procurement step when people are already spread thin. And so I'm curious about what are some of your strategies for helping people with that? Is that some of the things that the coaches do, or is it something else? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, we do have ideas, and that's actually kind of the basis of our grant that we are going to be applying for
Oh,
is to
awesome.
have that connector. We had hoped, that across the state, some kind of a coordinator or somebody that is working. We are excited for the food hub feasibilities. I mean, those are definitely connectors that can make that. But yes, we want them to know the producer, know who those producers are, and to be able to help then with those initial steps of introducing them to each other. So those are the things that we have hopefully some funding suggestions and things that we are working in that direction. So
Yeah, I think that'll be great. Especially, I think the questions around like, how do I navigate this procurement process with my school? And I know
that's
you
the
have the
big
Hexit
one.
plan. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and just the food safety questions as well too. And I know you have the Hexit plans on your website too. But just I think having that extra person to help walk somebody through would be an amazing resource for schools.
Yeah. So again, coaches, can help do that.
Awesome.
Specialists, those are kinds of things but again, as you out there, with those programs, if you see those barriers, again, we want to know here in our office, then, what kind of things are needed. And so that's where we work to ask our program operators, what do you think would be helpful to you? Because it is time, it is labor, and then it's the aggregation area, and which is aggravating. But then they also then express then the concerns of just getting, how to get the product. Because we did visit a district yesterday, and that district indicated that to get their local beef, they were actually driving their food truck to go pick it up on a monthly basis. And that happened with flour also, in the time of COVID, when there was a flour shortage. Many of those districts went out of their way to go ahead and drive to. We used K-State at that time. We also used Stafford, Hudson Cream, at that time to source our local flour. And so that they took those extra steps to actually go get the product. So these food hubs can be very, very beneficial, across our state to be able to do this. So I'm excited for the future in that area because that will make a big difference, I believe.
I actually did have a follow up if we now have an opening. You're talking about gardens as well. I don't know if you guys work directly with that. We have separate products and product line that we essentially we breed composting worms that it's a very specific species. They basically moves through material the best, gives you the best quality castings. Is this something that your program works, or is that more of a KDA, Kansas Department of Agriculture? Is there someone there I should be talking to? Because that's something we've been looking to introduce too. It has great educational value, and it's a great way for them to get basically like, hey, reduce your fertilizer load and have more successful yields. And we'll give them as donations.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is the first time through some of these coach reports that I've seen composting coming up quite often in those reports. So I do feel like there are programs out there. I don't know for sure how they're getting that education. We worked with Extension to kind of get some basic knowledge about composting when we've seen it at some of the schools, but I am not sure. I don't know, and I know that KC, the Kansas Association of Conservation and whatever, but anyway, that's a group that they educate teachers about those kinds of things. So I do feel like it's coming more from the classroom area than it would be, for us. But we're always excited if we see some, practices that they're using from the school lunches, as far as what they are composting then.
Do you guys collaborate at all? And just question for another stakeholder who's relevant. KDHE has in their solid waste management program units, they have folks that deal with composting. They specifically provide technical assistance to local stakeholders. Have they popped up in this at all?
No. But here, here in our group that we're in today, the partnerships that are here, we appreciate the partnership with the Kansas Rule Center. We do work a lot with KDA as far as our guidance, as far as the area of health and safety, in those areas, and trainings that we do with that. And so that, these are all partners that we, and we work with, like Kansas Farm Bureau through Shop Kansas Farms that I mentioned earlier, with the farm and food councils across the state. So partnerships and breaking down those silos, just knowing what each other is doing and how we can work together then to go ahead. And the same thing is happening in the districts too. What's happening in the classroom, which grades are actually having nutrition ed in their curriculums, and who's using ag in the classroom curriculum. Those are all things that can be very helpful then for us to, to go ahead and promote local in the products and in the process.
Thank you. That's a very helpful and robust answer. Thank you. I've got a lot of notes from that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Charlotte, I know we had worked with Casey. I know that Casey had green schools that are out there. I don't know if they still have like recognitions and awards for those districts that are actually really practicing good ecological, practices that they have. So
I believe they still do. I actually took their course this last spring, and they do still have green schools and then the awardees and the different courses. So I think they would be a good resource to try and find a partner with. And then Daniel, I'm in the Topeka area and I have a school that might be receptive. So my email, I can put it in the chat, is just charlotte@kansasruralcenter.org. But I wanted to put that out there before we ended the conversation and I didn't make that connection.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I got that a little bit. If you put that in the chat, I'll make sure I'll get it exact.
Yes.
And I will
Yep.
send you our contact information and some of the general boilerplate stuff I've been sending out to districts so you can see what the nature of our communication attempts have been up until now.
Yeah, that sounds great.
share them with us too, because we'll be happy to go ahead and help also to share your information. Gary, I know you have a question, and I was glad to see your name. It's been a while. It was on the Big Kansas road trip that we met each other. I don't know if you remember that or not. So
Absolutely, I do remember. I was curious if you remembered us.
Yes.
You probably remember the Scotch eggs and the lollipops more than you do my face.
Yeah, the food was really good. So
Good,
yeah,
good.
I remember you. Yes. Yes. What can we do?
Well, my questions are probably, they may be better suited to be answered offline because I'm just trying to make the connections here.
Okay.
First off, I guess my reaction would be I'm really excited about what you're explaining here. I'm coming to this meeting today from Leslie Monty made the connection, and I actually just responded to a RFP for a school district that we provide chicken to a school district that I don't know if they're involved in this or not, but I assume that they are because they have some sort of funding mechanism that's reimbursing them for our farm to table chickens. For anybody that might want to know, my selfish plug is I have freedomfarmsks.com or Freedom Farms. I'm a licensed producer grower, chicken producer here in Southeast Kansas, located just south of Fort Scott, and recently in the process of completing a contract with a local school to provide chicken. Um, I've my question is the biggest barrier that I run into is I have lots of districts that are talking to us that want to do this, but they're looking for funding that kind of bridges the gap between what they're paying from food service to our product pricing.
Yes.
So you mentioned reimbursable meals. Does this program actually pay for this, or is it bridge funding for the differentiation and process
Well,
price?
it is unfortunate in that, like the grants that I had mentioned, typically do not pay for food. We had the one exception, which Eryn mentioned, the local foods for schools, which there were some poultry, a couple poultry purchases there with that, which we actually were able to fund then for the payment, the cost then of the meats in the program, but that is something that we do not have, and it was one of the cuts that happened when changes happened in administration. So we do not have the funding for actually the food. So the I don't know, speech I guess that I will give is that if the kids know that it is local, then the participation will go up, and then they'll get more money because of the participation, and then they will be able to go ahead then and hopefully support their bottom line then through food service funding then to be able to do that. So no, we do not have additional funding for them to purchase the local products. They would have to use the current food service fund to do that. But again, your poultry product, you know, how often are they going to serve that product? You know, it can be a special meal in a month, you know, at a month, you know, it's just something that they can work in, you know, gradually, that they might consider to work with. So yeah,
Okay.
it's,
Okay. I did have one little thing I wanted to add to the group because you mentioned there's several barriers, which I have found also to be lots of barriers to local foods because of additional processes that needs to be done. The district that I'm working with, we went through the contract and whatnot, but they asked if they could have the drumstick or the leg cut off from the whole chicken separately so they could serve drumsticks as an individual meal from their whole chicken processing, which I think they're doing like chicken and noodles and whatnot. And so that was a nice compromise that we were able to produce, we were able to do. I'm actually a KSDA licensed chicken processor also. So we're producer grower and the processor.
that's wonderful.
And so I guess what I wanted to offer is if there's other people out there looking for obstacles to overcome, maybe don't be afraid to ask the producer what they can provide, because me cutting off the leg is really virtually no more time and it's really helping them out. And honestly, it's allowing me to sell more chicken.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's what, and I'm a past food service director, but that is typically what we actually served was the drumstick, you know, out there for the kids when we had our poultry, you know, we had our chicken on our menu then, from our, again, that at that time process sources, but yeah, so I think that's great. It's good to, and that's, well, it's the conversation that needs to happen, you know, just, you know, working with, like you said, you've done with the schools to see what their menus look like and what their needs look like. So we've tried to bring them together through some of our meetings, getting the producers and the districts together in a meeting to be able to have those conversations, but it takes continued conversations then to happen. So we're excited, Gary. I mean, this is great news that you're actually working with the school then in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. We just, as a producer, we need it to continue. You know, it has to be sustainable, and I can't sell my chicken for what they can buy chicken at the you know, for food service.
Yeah.
So that bridge funding is kind of vital to our success.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, with that. But hopefully the kids will really appreciate it, and then
We know that to be true.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Great. Well, that is the benefit, you know, of the local product, is the fact that, you know, it's less miles, you know, to get it to the, get it to the plate, and you know that the quality, the nutritional area is going to be much, much better as a result. And so those are the kinds of things that we want to help to support where we can in those areas.
When we're talking about the bridge funding, do you guys have kind of a percent or a number of what that difference is, that the school needs to be able to make up to pay the producer what it costs for them?
Well, it's broken down, Charlotte, a lot based on, again, the reimbursement that they receive. You know, say if they have $5 in reimbursement, then typically about 40% of that, so somewhere around $1.85, is what they actually have to produce a meal for a kid. So you guys, if you were out there trying to actually, build a meal for that price, what could you buy? And so that it is unfortunate, as far as, what they have. And then the labor, obviously another 40% goes into that. And then the other 20% of that is typically other direct costs, cost of the transportation and those kinds of things. But anyway, the budgets that they have to work with then to be able to go ahead and produce, a healthy meal out there for the kids that meets the requirements. That's so if you take that maybe $1.85 to $2 and put it out there on that 5 compartment tray that they have, and each part of it gets, a part of that money, you can see how much there's going to be left for the main part of the meal, that meat alternate part. So
I'll add too that there are states across the country that have like local food purchase incentives put on by their state provides an additional like 10 cents per meal, for example, if a school district is purchasing local foods. So in addition to getting the federal reimbursement from USDA, they also get state incentive cents or cents on the dollar for purchasing local foods. I think Michigan maybe has that. I think there's a handful.
mhm.
Arkansas, maybe. I don't, maybe don't quote me on the exact states that has that. Vermont, possibly, but Kansas does not, is the point.
So that's a
So,
legislative issue,
yeah.
out there in those states that have had the support of those kinds of things to be able to do that. So we aren't there yet in Kansas.
I
So I think where we want to really just work on is, raising more ag educators, kids that want to be involved in ag, and again, helping the growing of the products and raising of the animals, so that we then will go ahead and have a sustainable agriculture program, across the state, and then perhaps we'll see that interest continue in adding it into the meal program then.
Awesome. Is there any last questions for Barb and Eryn?
Yeah, just a quick one. Has there for secondary education, has there like been anything where like food suppliers could serve as like sponsors for athletic programs by providing food for like it's just something that we thought on because like there's a lot of like weight lifting, a lot of things where you need to eat a lot of greens, and that's kind of unpleasant when you're in heavy training. And we were like, oh, if we could find like a football local, is there anything like that you guys are aware of that's been done before that we could reference for like trying to build such a program?
Not real. I mentioned the supper program that is out
Mhm.
there in some of our programs. So that's through the CACFP program. So it's the after school supper program. So I think those have worked kind of with athletic practices and things at some of the districts across the state, to be able to go ahead and provide, that boost of a meal at the end. But as far as other areas, I'm not familiar.
I
Gotcha.
do
Thank
know in Topeka, we have the Washburn University campus, and they have a food contractor. I can't remember the name, but their contract is so tight that students aren't supposed to bring groceries to their dorms. They need to be buying it from that contractor. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't feel too confident in telling you to look at Washburn.
We tried to set up a farmers market here on the north side with their new campus, and they are real. Yeah, they're a little bit interesting to work with, so that doesn't surprise me. They mentioned directly their contractor relationship being very tight, and it's like, well, all right. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll say Kansas Wesleyan University, I think their student body is like 70 or 80% student athletes. And so they're very interested in local foods from that perspective. But it's all this question of navigating money, time, all those types of things. So it's currently not a go on any sort of big scale at the moment, but I think it's definitely an interest if we can get that math to work out.
No, okay, good. No, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was looking for just any existing precedent. I might need to look in other states and do some scale research just to find somebody I can kind of copy their model of. But yeah, thank you. This is all good.
And I know that Shawnee County does have a Farm and Food Council, Daniel, and I think that would be another way if you are involved in that group. Possibly they would help you, with some of these answers, when they could also help maybe in educating about your programs and things that you grow too.
Oh, absolutely. Shawnee County Farm and Food Council. That's the name.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I
Yeah.
know,
That's
Eryn, you do have a contact with that
yeah.
too.
I can just Google if that's the name. I'm good there. But no, thank you.
Okay. I think, is it Sarah? Sarah Collins? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's just those connections, and that's what we're here for, guys. We're here to help make those connections and, develop programs that will benefit, our producers as well as the programs that we operate. So like you've seen today, Eryn and Lori will be continuing on, and they'll do a great job. So don't hesitate to reach out to our department here at Child Nutrition and Wellness here in the Topeka. We're in the Landon building, and but we do work across the state with all programs then.
Thank you both so much for joining us today and sharing all of this knowledge. I, for one, have a ton of notes. And Eryn, I look forward to looking you up and helping some farmers across the state.
I'll continue to visit farmers and then share them with Eryn.
I don't think you can stop working, Barb. I think you're too passionate about this, but we'll see.
Yeah. I've enjoyed everything that I've done so far, so it's great. So, all right.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. With that, I'll go ahead and close the meeting, and I really appreciate your time today.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.